young organisation still, and I know from talking to your predecessors in the CEO role at the bank, the bank has long held aspirations to be a digital actor in this market as a way of achieving scale and driving growth. So let's talk a little bit about that and your approach to innovation. So the first question is, what motivation is driving your innovation in the bank?
Thanks, Andrew, and good morning to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I think the first question to ask is the why.
Yep.
The most important question about digital innovation always comes back to the why, and it's a key question to keep asking yourself at the beginning, in the middle, towards the end, particularly when things become challenging. Because if you're asking yourself, why am I embarking on a strategy of digital? Or even, why am I undertaking a platform replacement? Or why am I doing this project? Why am I replacing this particular product? It leads you to the obvious questions about things like, what is the problem I'm actually solving? That leads you to things like, what does it mean for my customers? What does it mean for my ROI? So for Kina Bank, the most important question that I set out to ask with our board and the then CEO Greg back in 2019 is, you're talking about you want to do a digital strategy and become PNG's leading digital bank. Why is that? Is that because we want to chase bright and shiny and exciting things? Or is it because there's a real opportunity here? There are some problems to solve. There are some real opportunities to help make a difference, both in terms of the growth of PNG and also to deliver value to our customers and our shareholders. But not just talking about Kina Bank though. If you ask yourself, different ways to come to your why can be to ask yourself questions about strategic risk. Now, strategic risk is not a very exciting topic on the surface of it, but if you dig into it, you really get to some interesting things. So I won't talk about a bank for a minute, although a bank, when they're trying to understand what are their strategic risks, could be what's going on around regulation, what's going on around geopolitics, what are some of the trends around data, what are some of the trends around digital assets and where are currencies going, what are some of the trends around AI and digitisation inside workplaces. What are some of the trends that are going on with respect to the future of the workforce? If you try to more deeply understand and interrogate those questions, you can identify for yourself things that can create fundamental strategic risks for your organisation. But then in Kina Bank's case, we said, well, that's great. What might break banks? What might break insurance companies? What might break the future of financial services? How can we do business with that, rather than build a wall and insulate that from us as an organisation from that? And that very deliberate decision leads you down a pathway of interesting choices. Just a couple of other non-bank examples in terms of strategic risk. Some of you in the room, even though it's not here in PNG yet, Airbnb, a global online platform you can rent out somebody else's room in their house. You don't have to go to a hotel anymore, and apologies to the wonderful people at the Stanley, I'm not having a go at that. But Airbnb was a self-funded family business that in 10 years had more rooms available to it than Hilton globally. Hilton took 100 years to reach their number of rooms, building infrastructure, cost, a digital platform that was virtual. It was a digital asset. Took 10 years to exceed that number of rooms. So if you look at the data now, and I just checked as our AI expert Mark was talking, I just wanted to refresh my memory. So I went to my AI tool called Monica to ask it a key question, and it told me that actually the Hilton now has 1.1 million rooms globally. Airbnb has 7 million. What are the assets that the Hilton has, and what are the assets and costs that Airbnb have? You can really start to ask yourself interesting questions about strategic risk when you consider those kind of possibilities.
Let's talk about what building blocks a business needs to have in place to kind of make some of these appraisals and decisions. I guess that starts, first of all, at board level, doesn't it? You've got to have an expertise, and traditionally boards are not necessarily full of people who have tech savvy, are they? They tend to be more mature people. They tend to be people with experience, but not necessarily people you go to work out why the internet isn't working.
Yes.
How do you approach that challenge, first of all?
Yeah, that's actually true, but I'd also add, Andrew, that I think if you look at boards and management teams now, the profile is actually changing.
Right.
I'm, one of the reasons I was very confident and proud to take up the CEO role for Kina is I looked firstly at the board.
Yep.
And you've got wonderful diversity of the board, which has, core bankers, ex-chief risk officers, experts in lending. But you've also got people that understand the fintech world, and you've got people that have bridged the divide between what a core bank does and what a tech company does. And I think boards and management teams need to have those kind of attributes and skills in the future. I mean, that might not be a relevant consideration for some of the people in the room, but I think it then comes down to if you're innovating and you're embarking on a journey, asking yourselves questions, I call it the 2 C's.
Yep.
Capability and capacity. So we might get onto some topics around, well, Kina Bank hasn't done everything well, because I'm sure some of you in the room might be customers of Kina Bank and have some things to say about that, such as an onboarding experience or a complaint or something like that. But I bring that back to what I call the risk of sometimes your eyes are bigger than your stomach. And I know as Kina's former CTO back in 2019 and 2020, this would be a great product, let's go do that. But you need to ask yourselves the question, do we have the technology infrastructure that would allow us to do that? Do we have the expertise in-house that would allow us to understand the risks and the opportunities to design, to develop, to do that? Do we have the capacity inside our organisation to deliver this thing, either a strategy or an individual product or a project? That's a key building block, because that can then lead you to questions like, do we build this ourselves, or do we find a partner who's already done it? And certainly that partnering element, questions like that have been key to Kina's journey, because we tend to have a bias towards partnering. And it's why, for example, we have a strategic partnership with one of our companies who will be up here today, NewPay, because they're good at doing things like the digitisation, the creation of the website, the enterprise resource planning, the fundamentals of the front end. We're a bank, and so we know what we're good at. So they do all that good customer interfacing digitisation work. We'll do the back end, and we'll share the value.
Let's talk a little bit about culture, because that's something that's really, something that also this event is really about trying to encourage in PNG. To your mind, what are the key aspects of developing an innovation culture inside Kina Bank, and what does an innovation culture actually look like?
I'd start by saying there's the old saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I'm potentially doing myself out of a job because I'm an ex-strategy guy. But I think it is actually true, because perhaps that saying talks to both the top-down aspect of an organisational culture, particularly with respect to innovation and digital, but also some of the bottom-up things as well. You spoke before about boards and CEOs and management teams. It's up to the folks at the top of an organisation, if that's how you describe them, to really set the tone from the top and to lead by example. And I know of plenty of organisations where, I guess culture exists in the will of people and in the actions of people as well. And you can embark on a digital innovation transformation journey to change your organisation or to change the world around you. But unless those folks at the top are going to stay the course, because things will get tough, unless they're going to stay the course and you're confident of that, I wouldn't actually start it. Because there's plenty of organisations, including one that I used to work for, that said, oh, look, it hasn't turned out, let's close down the lab. So you need to really do a key check. Is this strategy and opportunity owned by the board and the CEO? But importantly, in terms of the organisation, building culture across the organisation is also key. A couple of things that Kina Bank has done, and that we're really proud of actually. Over the last couple of years, we've put about 80 of our employees through what we call strategic intelligence work groups. And there are 2 reasons that we do that. One is to connect frontline employees or employees across all areas of the bank to some of the why and some of the components of our strategy. because if our employees can understand it and believe in it and are passionate about it, obviously they're in a position where they're, I suppose, more empowered or in better positions to represent our brand, our products, our service as well. But the other reason is the reason that not all the answers lie with a board, a CEO or the management team. You're only one person, in our case, in an organisation of about 780 people. So harnessing the collective intelligence of your organisation and asking your people, your staff, in all corners of the organisation, where do you think regulation is going in PNG? What do you think about geopolitics? What do you see about the future of data here in PNG? Do you think that causes us any causes for concern? Or do you think that actually creates opportunity for us as well? And it's amazing when you start to harness collective intelligence, and you don't have to have fancy tools. You can have a whole bunch of post-it notes up on a wall. That's fine. But it's about asking the question. The other thing example I'll give is, it was with great pleasure that late last year I gave a talk to about 150 people leaders and specialists at Kina Bank. And the topic was a growth mindset. And the topic was, why does a growth mindset matter? And we're only at the beginning of that journey at Kina Bank. And it's built on the premise that if you're going to change an organisation, and if you're going to transform it, and if it's going to make a difference to the environment that you work in and to the people of the country that you operate in, if you are seeking to change the organisation, you first need to be able to change yourself.
Yes.
Because people who have self-transformative practices are more likely to be successful in transforming an organisation. And we run some simple workshops, what I call daily habits of transformational leaders. So we've done some, and we've piloted some workshops with things like, what are the daily habits that you do? Like, listening to learn is a whole lot more powerful than listening to win. Taking different perspectives. I might know my opinion and I might know I have my bias, but maybe I should listen more carefully to the person over there that I usually disagree with. What would my perspective look like if I put myself in their shoes? Asking different questions. And I think the first question that came to Mark before, I think might have come from the Kina Bank table, and it gave me a warm and fuzzy moment because that question probably wouldn't have been asked at Kina Bank a couple of years ago. And it was quite a deep question, which is, how do you integrate AI into legacy banking tech?
Yep.
That's a really important question to ask. So things like that, I think there's no one answer for culture, but you really need to look at the different parts of your organisation and try to get the whole organisation understanding and participating. Personally, I much favour that way of doing things than what some organisations choose to do, which is, I'll create a team of 10 secret people over in the corner. I'll go and send them to that building over there and we'll lock the door and we'll put a black flag on the roof. They can break the organisation, or they can do the cool stuff while the rest of the organisation gets on with business. Yeah. That I don't prefer.
Yeah. Let's get to some specific projects that you've worked on at Kina Bank and maybe some of the learnings from them. Pete Williams from Deloitte Centre for the Edge, who was our very first inaugural keynote speaker and awards judge back in 2019, was always very keen to point out that innovation, because it's about trying something new, is inevitably going to lead to occasionally some wrong turns, some mistakes. That's a part of the process. So maybe we could talk about some of the projects that you guys have been involved with and some of the things that maybe haven't gone quite so right and what you've learned from that process.
How much time do we have?
7 minutes?
Okay, sure. So look, I'd say at the outset, Kina Bank is, and we're very proud of the many firsts we've had into market, just to list a couple of them. The first commercial bank in PNG to do a fully regulatory compliant, scalable eKYC solution. That's a game changer. And in fact, just a couple of weeks ago, we did 23 enhancements to that because we realised when we first launched it, it wasn't perfect. You know, that was a real milestone for the bank. Other things like the first bank in the Pacific to integrate the Zero Bank Feed API into our corporate online and retail online internet banking so that SMEs or big business or others can easily extract transactional data and put it into their accounting software. Because who wants to be dealing with data and software and stuff when you're trying to run your business? You know, that's really important. WhatsApp banking. First bank in the Pacific to put their bank onto WhatsApp. And just a little quick why on that one. WhatsApp for Kina Bank has been a really good example of not doing something because you think it's going to go gangbusters, but doing something because you're going to learn. So the reason why I was really keen, and some people in our tech team, to put WhatsApp banking into market, we looked at China and we went, what happened with WeChat? Who's familiar with WeChat in China? Yeah, messaging platform. All of a sudden, you wake up a couple of years later and they're bigger than a bank. Trillions and trillions of dollars of payments, peer-to-peer payments, merchant payments. So our experiment there was, let's take the bank to where our customers interact socially and professionally. They don't have to come to us. Let's take our bank to them. And WhatsApp, perhaps only 5 or 10% of our customers use it. It doesn't make any money for Kina Bank, and that's okay, because we're learning about the future of interactions through products and services like that. Our other one was we're the first commercial bank in PNG to have a scalable, what I call internet banking payment gateway. So e-commerce is still quite nascent in PNG, but at some stage it's really going to take off. One of our partners, NewPay, is doing a great job at digitising government and front-end services for payments, and we're the banking partner, so yes, that is a shameless plug. But nevertheless, it is a good example of investing into a capability that you're not sure exactly when it's going to scale, but you're pretty sure it's going to be a thing. But in terms of key lessons learned, I think I already spoke about the first one. I actually wrote down 3 here. One was the eyes are bigger than your stomach risk, which is just because you have a good idea and just because you think your customers are going to use it, it doesn't mean you can implement it. Because if I implement that thing over there, say WhatsApp banking, for example, what must I stop doing over there? Do I have the capabilities and expertise inside my organisation to get this thing done? Do I have the capacity? Do I have the budget? Am I going to be able to deliver the ROI? So Kina Bank, from time to time, and guilty as charged, has suffered from what I call the eyes are bigger than your stomach risk, because we're still a small bank. Even though we're the second largest bank in PNG, there's a pretty big gap in market share. The other one is, do you build or partner? Again, lesson learned from some things not always done incredibly well inside Kina, but hopefully we're doing much better now, is when do we build it ourselves? Do the coding, do the manufacturing, do all the design? Or when do we partner? Because actually, someone else has already solved this problem, and here's a product or a platform which we could take from another market that's been through a similar journey as this market and stick our brand on it. Really critical strategic decision, because at first you think you want to own and control everything. That's not necessarily a pathway to success. And the final lesson learned from Kina Bank is scale can be difficult to achieve. And when you are innovating, you need patience. A good example is WhatsApp. Our customers who use it, they love it. In fact, I was talking to a customer the other night at the Fiji investment cocktail party. He said, I love your WhatsApp banking. And I said to him, I wish more customers were using it, because our customers who do use it really actually like it. So there's a degree of patience and understanding that you need to have, because things don't always go to plan.
We're going to have to wind up shortly, Ivan, but maybe we've been already hearing some of the interesting stuff that's happening in fintech or financial technology, the trends that are coming in the future, and we're going to learn a bit more about some of those as well later on today. What's exciting you? What trends in that area are you getting excited at or looking at the moment?
Yeah, I think I just got quite excited by Mark's presentation then, and I've been feverishly writing some things down, and I'm off to go and see Rajiv, the CEO of NASFund, to ask if I can borrow his tech. I'm pretty excited about that.
Yes.
But look, I think looking globally, I think it's good to look both globally at change and also look at your local context and look at the synergies between those two things. So just a couple of quick things, the use of data and making meaning. Traditionally data was used for retrospective performance management and reports and so on. The world is actually changing. Data is fueling technology platforms built around AI and so on. That to me is fascinating. The use of AI, and I think Mark actually mentioned it, I personally think there is a real sweet spot here in PNG for AI, which is the efficiency and customer sweet spot. I don't think AI in Kina Bank or in the context of PNG should be about taking out jobs. It might change people's jobs. And you might have to, as an organisation, think about retraining people for the future. And that's exciting if you've got a growth mindset inside your organisation. But quite often, if you look at a bank or many other types of companies, often fixing a process that takes too long, for example, if it takes 2 or 3 months to process a home loan inside a bank, gee, you could, through using AI tools, perhaps with some parallels to what NASFund is actually doing, you could compress that cycle time hugely. That creates better customer experience at the same time as making you a more efficient business. Regulation, and back in February 2019, when I first ran my first strategy retreat with Kina Bank's board as a consultant at the time, was the first macro change globally and locally I started with was regulation. Now that's not exciting, is it?
Makes things happen.
But a really important place to start, because it's interesting. Often the first question, and I've spoken with a lot of fintechs, startups who have something exciting to say about a product or service. Often the first question I'll ask is, tell me about the understanding of your regulatory environment in which you work. Tell me about the risks that creates for your assumed business model, or tell me about the opportunities. And I think moving forward, if you look at the speed of regulatory change globally, here across the Pacific and in PNG, and the Bank of Papua New Guinea from a financial services perspective is a very progressive regulator. They've helped to promote things like EKYC, they're looking at cloud, other things. Locking on to where your regulator is actually going is actually key as well.
Brilliant. Just finally, we've got one question from the app we've got time for. There were a couple more, so thank you. Keep those questions coming. This is from Kamatan. What does success look like as far as your digital strategy is concerned? How do you know when you've got a winner?
Well, I think we've probably already covered a few of those. Success can look like you've learnt the thing that you wanted to learn. In the case of a couple of our tech platforms that don't have massive scale, but have really interesting customer feedback about it, we're learning something about the next thing that we want to do. So learning is certainly one. Of course, it's wonderful to build our market share and scale in the business, particularly given the comparative market share opportunity here in PNG. Of course, we're a publicly listed company. We're dual listed on the ASX and the PNGX. We have shareholders, we're accountable to them, so we need to naturally produce a return on investment. They've entrusted their capital to us, and it's incumbent on the organisation to provide a fair and reasonable return for them as well. There's the people side of things as well. It's really important with our digital journey that we get a sense of growth inside our workforce. I would love it if all employees of Kina Bank could stay with us and grow forever, but also recognise that sometimes they might prefer to go and have another opportunity inside another organisation. That's often okay because you feel like you've been part of their growth and their journey. And finally, on the risk side of the business, it's a bit like the regulation one. Being compliant with your regulations, AML, CTF, those kind of things, if you look at outcomes from a project or a digital journey, it's really important to also look at the risk side as well. So I'd say the customer side, the people side, the risk and the regulation side as well, and also the financial side of things.